Hi, thanks so much for tuning in. My name is Mathew. Now, if you've bought a house and if you're paying a loan, or if you plan to buy a house and plan to take a loan, then this conversation is going to be very important for you. The reason being that over the last year, in fact, since May last year, the Reserve Bank of India has raised interest rates by 250 basis points. And in most cases, this has already been passed on to those that have taken loans over the last 1 year. Now, in several situations, you wouldn't have noticed a difference because the bank chooses to keep your EMI the same wherever possible and chooses to increase the tenor. This means that your interest cost rises very substantially. What's more, if you're planning to take a loan right now, you'll have to bear in mind that we're likely at very close to the peak levels of interest rates. So at the start of your loan repayment cycle, you're going to be paying a lot of interest. So we're going to talk about strategies that you should employ if you are paying back a loan and whether or not you should choose to take a loan right now or to wait for just a bit. My guests today are Pankaj Bansal, the Chief Business Officer at Bankbazaar, and we've got Nikhil Kothari, who's a Director at Etica Wealth as well. Thank you so much, gentlemen, for taking the time. Pankaj, I'll start with you. And in fact, if you can elucidate what I was saying for people who have taken a loan. In fact, I had asked for an illustration and Bankbazaar shared one with me. And I was talking about a 30 lakh loan for a 15-year period, just to try and understand how interest rates have gone up and the impact on EMI. You can choose to have a different example, but can you explain the impact of the rising interest rates?
Yeah, so I'll tell you, Alex, I think obviously today the repo rates are about 6.5% in the country. And I think if you look at in May 2021, right, when the interest rates were bottom in terms of the, repo rate at 4%. So we have seen a significant change from 4% to 6.5%. And obviously, if I do allude to the, if I go back to the same data, right, in May 2019, we were at 6.25 as a repo rate. So there is not much of a change from May 19 level, but it's a significant change from I would say May 21 level because of the COVID impact and whatever RBI interventions happened. So obviously, I'll tell you, because of these impacts, right, the EMIs and the tenures have increased for a lot of people. If I'm taking a 20-year loan for about 30 lakhs, right, my EMIs have risen exponentially, and I think I'll be paying about 4 years more if my EMI remains constant. So that's one bit of the story which is happening when the interest rates are at 6.5%, at pegged against the repo rate of 6.5% right now. So I think this is going to increase further. Maybe one more rate hike we are expecting to happen, and that would be the peak level for home loan buyers from an interest rate perspective. And from there, I think we are estimating that it will come back, over a period of time. So I think that's how broadly the numbers stand up.
So I want to divide this conversation into two baskets, which is one for those people who are paying back a loan. And before I come to you, Nikhil, on the initial strategies one can employ and what the threshold for EMIs are, I want to drive home this point because I think a lot of banks are choosing, Pankaj, to increase the tenure. Yeah. And you've mentioned that there is a substantial increase in tenure. But from the perspective of the borrower, this option results in a much higher interest cost as opposed to increasing the EMI. Do you have that illustration?
Yeah. So I think, I would say that in terms of illustration, and I'm just putting up a strategy for the consumers, what they can do in this kind of a high interest rates environment. I'll tell you a very basic number. If I'm taking a 20-year loan, right, and if I repay only 5% of the outstanding balance every year, my loan of 20 years will cut down to 11 years. It's a very simple statistics. That's point number one. So if I'm taking a 20-year loan, forget the amount of, what is the number, just paying by 5% outstanding every year, my loan will be reduced to 11 years. That's point number one. Point number two, even if I just pay one additional EMI, in 12 months, I pay 13-month EMI, my loan will reduce to about, 3 years and 9 months from the current level. So if it is 20 years, obviously 3 years and 9 months will happen. So from a statistics perspective, very two basic fundamentals if the consumers can understand that they just have to pay 5%, then it will be huge reduction in their, and the EMI remaining constant, huge reduction in their outflow in terms of the number of EMIs they have to pay. And if they pay one extra EMI every year, it will be 3 years, 9 months that you will reduce your tenure, assuming everything remains constant in terms of EMI.
Fair point. Fair point. Yeah. I have the numbers in front of me. So before I toss to you, Nikhil, assuming that you started paying a home loan at 7%, And if the rate of interest has risen to 9.25% now, then your EMI would have risen to 30,876 from 26,965. That would result in a change in the interest cost of just over 7 lakh rupees. In the same instance, if your tenor had risen instead of your EMI, that would result in a change in the interest cost of nearly 20 lakh rupees. So it is a significantly higher amount of interest that you would pay if you choose to increase the tenor. Now, I come to the point, Nikhil, of while you're repaying a loan, there are certain parameters that you need to bear in mind so that you're not stretched. There are certain thumb rules you can follow. What advice would you give to people? For example, how much of your cash flow should go back to paying an EMI?
Okay, so first people have to understand between the need and the want, right? There's no end to the want, right? So you need a certain house and a certain square feet, and based on that you have a budget that this is the amount of loan I want to take it. But when you start hunting for the house, you may end up normally then, okay, normally I'm getting a loan, so why don't I buy a bigger house, right? And so the problem what happens is that when you see the EMI, right? So you can say, okay, today when the interest was 7%, you could say that, okay, I can afford to pay the EMI. Let me take a slightly higher loan, right? But what happens is that it's a floating rate interest loan. So the interest rate will keep on changing if the RBI increase the interest rate. And today, as you rightly say, that the EMI cost has increased, right? Now, because the EMI cost has increased, people are feeling strain in their cash flows, right? So you have a monthly budget, and if your EMI is crossing the monthly budget, right, then what happens is you have to sacrifice on your financial goals. You have to reduce your SIPs, you have to compromise your financial goals, you have to compromise on your lifestyle goals. Now, compromise lifestyle goals is still fine, but not on the mandatory expenses. So you have to make sure that your EMI should not be crossing that you can't pay your mandatory expenses and you can't fulfill your financial goals.
Is there a percentage though?
Yeah. So normally I'm saying if you're taking a home loan, right, ideally the percentage should be 35 to 45%. Maximum what you can afford is not more than 50%. Right, so your income, your 50% of that salary should not be going beyond that in EMIs, and that's a maximum cap. But what I'm trying to say is that normally you should end up being in the range of 35 to 45% as a number which you want to keep in mind when you're taking an EMI.
Okay, to take that point a little forward, now a lot of people that I have spoken to as well, and this is anecdotal evidence, we won't get data on this, Nikhil, but people choose to sacrifice on certain long-term goals. Like, for example, they will say, okay, I will not save as much as I would normally save for my retirement corpus because I need to repay my house loan or because I need to buy a house. Is that detrimental? And what conversations have you had that help to illustrate this point?
So just to give you a perspective, right? If you're looking for long-term goals, right, doing that SIP every month on month, right? Now that you can look at SIP from two perspectives. One is that this is a liquid money. What you're paying the EMI, you won't have any liquid money with you. Tomorrow, if you have any financial problem, right, the money which you save for your other goals can help you sail out through financial goals. Right? But if say, for example, if you don't have any liquidity, then what you do at that point of time? And if you have to default on your EMIs, then your house may also be good. So first, what we normally recommend to every person is that first you should create a contingency fund for 6 months. Right? That if for whatever reason you're not able to get your salary, you should be able to continue the EMIs. Right? So that's one parameter. Second thing is that if you look in long-term goals, if I'm looking at equity can give you 12 to 13% return over a long period of time. And even if paying EMI of 8-9%, that the incremental 3% over a long period of time can help you repay your home loan faster. You also have a liquidity, and if you continue the SIP for 10 years, the amount which you will accumulate can help you to repay your home loan faster. So I won't recommend that you increase only your EMI and not fulfill your long-term goals, because that will give you liquidity and also security that in future you have some corpus left with you to take care of your retirement.
Pankaj, coming back to you on this point of increasing of tenor, in certain cases, because of the sharpness of the increase in the interest rates, this is pushing people beyond even retirement age. And I have actually spoken to a few people who have, say, taken a very long loan, so 25-year loan, and they're in their mid-30s. And the resultant increase in the tenor as a result of the increase in the interest rate has pushed them beyond 60 that they would be paying back this loan. Now, banks apparently as a default choose to increase tenor. How do you ensure that this does not take place, since we've established that generally, if possible, paying a higher EMI is the better option?
Yeah, so I think normally the interest cycles are any which ways you are there in for 2 years in a high interest cycle, then obviously there will be a time where you will see a reduction in the interest rates will happen in terms of the overall period. When you look at 25-year or 30-year kind of a loans, right? It's a very long 10-year loans. So you will find sometimes the EMI goes beyond a particular stretcher, like 25 will become 28, 29, 30, depending on what stage of loan you are servicing at that level and what is your outstanding at that level. But broadly, over a period of time, normally, Alex, in India, the market average that you would normally repay your home loan in 8 years, broadly, that's a thumb rule. So what will happen, even when the interest rates are going up, even when your EMIs are going up, your tenures are going up, obviously over a period of 25 years, some cycles will have large interest rate cycles, some cycles are very low interest rate cycles, what we recommend in the last 1.5 to 2 years. So the point is that even if your interest rates are rising, even if this thing, so one rule thumb that we have been proposing to all our consumers is saying that prepay whatever possible without, as Nikhil rightly said, without compromising your lifestyle, without compromising your, lifestyle needs and emergency fund. You should start repaying and prepaying because it's a very high interest rate market. Obviously, it makes sense to do all that. So I think normally we don't find an average home loan going beyond 8 years, even it's a 20-year loan. It's a 30-year loan, obviously the numbers will change a little bit, but broadly in 8 to 10 years, we've never seen that somebody crosses 25, 30 years. You don't carry your home loans in the scheme of things because your income keeps rising, your other things keeps moving up, but broadly that's our benchmark. So prepayment and
speaking about prepayment, Pankaj, why don't you explain when in the loan repayment cycle it's the most beneficial? Because I don't think a lot of people realize how the EMI is structured over the period of the repayment cycle.
Yes, Alex, it's a good question. So what happens normally, the more you prepay in the initial part of the loan, right? The moment I take a loan today, the first year, second year, your interest, because normally if you look at your amortization schedules, right, your interest are first taken up from your entire scheme of things. So the 80, 90, 90% or 92% of that particular initially will be your interest and 8% will be your principal. So the thumb rule is that the more you prepay earlier, the better it is from a customer standpoint. So if the first year I take a loan, if I prepay earlier, nothing like it. First 4 to 5 years, I would say, is the most critical time where you try to prepay as much as you can based on your, obviously it will differ from consumer to consumer, but the first 3 to 4 years, I will recommend consumers very, very sharply that start repaying immediately the moment you take home loans. Whatever excess money you have, please park it into your repayment schedules. So that will really help you to lower down your tenures over a period of time, assuming without changing your EMIs.
And you've already elucidated that point at the start of the conversation. Even repaying one extra EMI is quite a significant benefit. Nikhil, coming back to you on the second half of this conversation, which is, I think a lot of people endeavor to buy a house. It's a goal that they have. But then the timing of this can be decided. It's not something that you need to go and do tomorrow. You can give it a few years if you have to. Do you think there is merit in hitting the pause button right now and shoring up capital and increasing the down payment that you have, considering the interest rate scenario we're in right now?
See, currently, if you're looking from a pure consumption perspective, right, then from a consumption perspective, as what Pankaj said, that because the home loan is for 20 years, you'll have different rate cycles. So today interest rate high, but tomorrow if interest rate comes down, you'll be able to compensate for that. But ideally, whenever you're planning to buy a house, right, you should always start your investments far earlier, so maybe 5-6 years, and then start doing SIP for buying a house, which can help you to make the down payment of that part. Now, when you're buying a house, you have to look at two things. One is the interest rate high, then it will be a great time to start buying a house. At the same time, you have to look at the broad real estate prices, right? If you think the real estate prices are slightly higher, then you can if you can postpone your purchase, you can postpone by 1 or 2 years. Start accumulating more of corpus, start doing SIPs far more than what you're able to do the EMIs, start doing those SIPs and create a corpus so that you can make the down payment faster. But broadly, if I look at 20-year period, interest rate entry point may not be the same after 5 years because interest will always go through ups and downs. So that's the one point you have to take it. But if you're buying from investment perspective, right, this may not be a great time at all because you're paying a very, if you're buying a real estate, taking a loan and thinking that you will consider the investment, you are taking a loan at 9%, right? The real estate has to give you more than 9%, right? To benefit out of this one, which is not very easy scenario, right? So from an investment perspective,
In fact, why don't you also take us through how real estate as an asset class has performed over the last 5 years? I don't think that people realize this, because there is a bias towards real estate, because conversations, Nikhil, that we have at dinner parties where some uncle tells us, oh, I bought this property 20 years back at 5 lakh rupees, now it's worth 2 crore. We don't realize that actually the CAGR is not very significant because 2 decades have passed, right?
So just to give you an example, one of the iconic properties in Bombay, Samudra Mahal, right, which was, when it came out, it was 700 square feet, right? In 2012, when the price was 1 lakh per square feet. So from absolute number, 700 to 1 lakh looks great, but if you convert the CAGR, it's not more than 10-11%, right? So if you, in real estate, what happens most of the time, we always consider absolute number. We never consider CAGR number. But if you look at broadly, if you look at 5-6 years, last 7-8 years, real estate in Bombay has not more than appreciated by 4-5% year on year, and you are paying the EMI of 8-9%. So effectively, you're losing out when you've taken a real estate in the last 4-5 years, right? And second thing is that in rental yield in India is very, very good. If you look at abroad, the rental yield is 2-2.5%, and the EMI is also 2-2.5%. But in India, the rental yield is 2-2.5%, but the EMI cost is 7-8%. So if you're only buying property looking from an investment perspective and saying I will get a rental income, it's not a viable option in India. So when you're buying the real estate, you should look at what can be appreciation over a long period of time. Last 4-5 years has not been that great. I'm saying it's not that real estate will not revive. It may revive in the next few years, but assuming at 8-9% year-on-year growth is not a very easy given in the current scenario, right? So what I'm trying to say is that, and more so in metros, right? So if you're looking purely from investment perspective, high interest cost is not a great time to get in real estate. But from a consumption perspective, interest cost is not the main determinant factor when you're buying a house. You need to look at locality, you need to look at builder, and you also need to look at your affordable EMI. Can you afford to pay the EMIs right now?
Yeah, and that's not even mentioning the maintenance costs that you have over a period of time, and the possibility of liquidating that asset, because it's a home. It's beautiful for you, but it might be difficult to find a buyer who has the same point of view, so, and getting the price that you want. But gentlemen, I think we've covered a lot of very important points, and you've given actionable insight as well. Thank you so much for taking the time. Viewers, thank you so much for tuning in. Do write to us if you have any questions, and we'll endeavor to answer all of them.